Hey guys, welcome to episode 14 of the weekly update, the series where I talk about the paddles that I hit throughout the week. Now, originally I was going to release my wide body paddle video, but I ended up getting some more paddles in the mail, so I figured I should instead cover some first impressions so I could add more paddles onto that video. But anyways, let's get into these first impressions. First up, let's talk about the 14mm versions of the Vatic Sagas. The 16mm versions were already very good. Gen 1.5 style paddles that had a more plush feel and a higher power than most Gen 2 paddles. With the 14mm paddles, you pretty much get what you would expect. Lower swing weights on all the models and higher pop, but at the same time you get lower stability from the paddles being lighter. For those of you that wanted more overall firepower on the Saga series, 14mm variant with added weight around the paddle definitely delivers here. And for a lot of people, they will see this as the power upgrade they're looking for. I just found the paddle to be a bit stiffer and springier than I expected, considering how plush the 16mm version was, and for me, I just wasn't a huge fan of that. Personally, I didn't like that stiff feel because to me, it has a much more unpleasant feel on off-center shots, but again, this is a personal nitpick. My main issue with the sagas, though, is how they've made the samurai logo hard to see. A lot of times, people thought I was just running around with the original V7 and Flash series, and I do wish they made the samurai stand out a bit more. Out of all of them, I found the Bloom to be my favorite. It's the most similar to the Flare Prime X in terms of firepower and its sweet spot, but while the Flare has a bit more dwell time, solid feel, and slightly more power, you get that stiffer feel on the Bloom 14. Overall, a great addition to the Vatic Pro lineup that's priced pretty affordably at $129, and that drops down even lower after a discount code. Next, let's move on to the Engage innovations. I talked about these briefly on the All Drive No Drop podcast already, and now that I've been able to spend more time with the paddles, both the 12.7 and the 15.2 variants, I will say that my opinion on them hasn't changed. Basically, they're like the original elongated Pursuit Pros, but with a bit more of a denser and plush feel, while the original Pursuit Pros are a bit more stiff, hollow, and slightly more powerful. For playability, they're very close side by side if you look at things like the spin and how they both have a similar sweet spot that is on the smaller side, but overall the main difference is the feel. Like I mentioned on the podcast, it's like the difference between the Joola Gen 3s and the Pro 4s, but not as drastic. Speaking of the Pro 4s, let's talk about some of the new shapes I was able to try. Let's start with the Magnus. This is basically the Perseus shape with a shorter 5-inch handle. Now with the way the throw tapers though is on the wider side, so for me it was tough to put both hands on the handles to do a two-hander, and I would feel the edge guard dig a bit into my hand. I still did enjoy the shape however because it felt more stable than the other elongated shapes. And if you don't have a two-handed backhand, or if you have smaller hands, you may really enjoy this model because it's the most stable and forgiving out of all the elongated Pro 4 models. But personally for me, I just wish either the throw taper was sharper or the handle was slightly longer, and I would like this a lot better. For the Hyperion, this one was the most customizable out of the elongated options. It had the lightest static weight and swing weight out of the box for the elongated models, so it did feel the most unstable, but this allowed for more customization with tape if that's something you are interested in. But again, not a paddle I would recommend hitting stock out of the box. Finally, I tried the Scorpeus 14mm, which I think is probably the most powerful standard shape paddle on the market right now. I like it a lot better than the Gen 3s version of it, and for people looking for a powerful wide body paddle, they're really going to like this one. For me, I'm not the biggest fan of this shape because the square shape is a bit balanced in terms of the sweet spot, and for these shorter shapes, I prefer to have the balance pushed up a little bit higher, especially because the overall reach of the paddle is shorter. But that's more of a personal preference, and I still think for most people, they'll really enjoy the Scorpius 14 if you do like this square shaped standard paddle. But overall, all the shapes are what you really expect from the Pro 4s. They're basically the Gen 3s paddle, but with that more plush feel we talked about earlier. I think they're overall improvements over the Gen 3s all around, so if you are a fan of that series, I do recommend checking out these new Pro 4 shapes now that they are released. Lastly, let's talk about the Revolin Drift Reach. This is a Gen 1 paddle that actually uses a lava rock surface instead of carbon fiber. I have the elongated version, which also has a 16mm core thickness and a 10mm cell core diameter. Now this is a power paddle, but it does have a surprisingly plush feel off the face. It reminds me of the Paddletech DKOs because they both have that smaller sweet spot, but when you do hit that area, it's got a great feel of power to it. But while you have a much more crisp feel with the Paddletechs and more power, you get that aforementioned plusher feel on the Revolin. Like the Paddletechs, this is a paddle that does benefit with more weight. I ended up adding tungsten tape and electrical tape all around the paddle edges to boost up the overall stability and found this to make the paddle a lot more enjoyable. Out of the box, it does come pretty light as mine has a swing weight of 115 and a twist weight of 5.60, so it definitely has a lot of room available for customization. With the weight I added, this really punched up the firepower a lot more, where I'd place it in the same realm as my Thrive Spoke. It's also more affordably priced than the other Gen 1 power paddles at $174, and I personally think it's an underrated option. If you want a power paddle that has little to no risk of core crushing and a more muted paddle feel, this is definitely a great option to consider. I haven't tried the wide body though, but if it's like the elongated one, I do think it's a big contender against the Paddletech Bantam ALWs and ESQs. One last thing is like the other Gen 1 power paddles, this is also made in the US. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Hope you all enjoyed it, and let me know what you think down in the comments below.